The Rotary Club of Columbus is a membership organization with a passion for service. Founded in 1915, we're one of Rotary's largest and oldest clubs worldwide. My name is Tyler Townsend, and I have the privilege of serving as the 2019-2020 Club President. We all know the challenges the coronavirus pandemic is posing. Our club has faced tough times, including 2 world wars, but this is the first time we've had to suspend our in-person meetings. So instead of meeting here at the Trade Center, we're going to meet every week online until it's appropriate to return. So whether you're a member or a guest, thank you for joining us today. We're happy that you're here. Welcome to the June 10th meeting of the Rotary Club of Columbus. I'm happy that you're here, and whether some of you may be joining by Facebook Live, some of you may be watching later on demand through Facebook or YouTube, and some of you are using our dial-up conference call line. So thank you for being here. I hope that all of you have received your Rotary Club of Columbus mask. So this is just a small gift from the club just to say that we miss you. We hope that you're staying safe. We look forward to seeing you soon. I also want to let you know that this week it was announced that the Rotary International Disaster Relief Fund, so this is the fund that people from all over the world, including us, donate to through the Rotary Foundation, and they provide relief funds throughout the world. Well, this week they announced that they have granted $3,200 to our Feeding the Valley food bank. So I'm happy for Feeding the Valley. I'm happy that Rotary recognized the need here in our community and that we were able to help out our neighbors that way. I want to remind you that as a live audience on Facebook, I want to encourage you to chat with your friends and ask questions of our speaker. So we'll be able to get to those at the end. At this time, we're going to do our Pledge of Allegiance. This week, the pledge is being brought to us by Addison and Charlotte Williams. These are the nieces of fellow Rotarian Judy Thomas.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Addison and Charlotte, I want to thank you for leading the Rotary Club of Columbus in the Pledge of Allegiance. Another great tradition of our club is to have a military guest at each of our meetings. And during this time of virtual only meetings, we've adapted a little bit, and we're doing those online as well. So at this time, Pete Jones will introduce our Soldier of the Week.
President Tyler, fellow Rotarians, I'm Brigadier General Retired Peter Jones, President and CEO of the National Infantry Museum Foundation. And as we stand here this morning in front of our POW MIA Memorial, also by standing next to plaques from the Comet Line, and in honor of also Ross Perot here at our memory trees, it's great to have another soldier from Fort Benning that we can honor this morning. Now this young specialist is very unique. She actually is only celebrating her first year in the Army, and she is from Northern California, but actually went to the University of Alaska to get a degree in natural resource management, but also to shoot competitively at the collegiate level. And the Army had been after her in high school and finally got her after college to join the U.S. Army Marksmanship Unit and join that great team of Olympians, and you do need to comment about that. because that unit does really three great things for us. One, serves as instructors and helps us validate our training program for our next generation of infantrymen and soldiers throughout the Army. And two, our spokesman as we do our recruiting effort across the United States. And three, helps folks who compete at the international level to stay focused, to be able to go on to the Olympics if they can make the cut. So Specialist Madalena, it's great to have you here. And I know you've only been in the Army for a year, and actually your specialty is not infantry or armor, but you are an artilleryman. So it's great to have somebody who's had training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, to come here and celebrate with us today. On behalf of the Rotary Club, we'd like to give you a couple things. First of all, always got to have a new challenge coin.
Thank you.
All right, we'll do that. And the other one is a great passports to the arts. So you and good friend can go and have 2 tickets to the River Center once we reopen that up, which hopefully will be soon. Attend events at the Columbus Symphony Orchestra. You can go to the Columbus State University Theater Department, which is down by the water. If you've ever been to whitewater rafting, that theater department down there. The Springer, which is the Georgia Opera House. They have some great shows there. And then obviously we'd like you to come back here to the National Infantry Museum, because when you do come back, I have a arcade downstairs, and I want to take you on.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your service.
Thank you. And thanks to the Rotary Club. This is a huge honor, especially just being in for 1 year, coming up on my first anniversary here pretty soon. I haven't been able to do any tours yet, but as an international shooter, I'm able to compete around the world. Gives me a chance to meet and interact with all different kinds of people. And especially being on the working to get to the Olympic team, that is a great achievement in itself. Just going to the trials and getting to the Olympics. So we're working on it. We have one more selection match to go before the team is decided.
Well, best of luck to you and to the rest of the Rotarians. Appreciate your support.
Specialist Madalena, on behalf of our 300 members, I want to thank you for your service. You and your fellow soldiers at Fort Benning make us proud. And we look forward to you joining us at a meeting when we are back in person. Until then, I want to wish you luck on your competitions to you and your teammates. At this time, we're going to introduce a new member, and Kazad Shroff will do the introduction.
President Tyler, fellow Rotarians, and honored guests. On behalf of the Rotary Club of Columbus, it is my privilege to induct a new member today. Please allow me to introduce Sanjay Chaudhary. Sanjay immigrated to the US about 25 years ago and worked for TSYS and JP Morgan till about 2009. He's an entrepreneur, a restaurateur, and owns 5 restaurants in and around Columbus, including both the Wild Wing Cafes, both the Trivioli Italian Kitchens, and Hudson's at Main Street. Sanjay has always been a giver and is involved with the Valley Rescue Mission and Feeding the Valley. He is quick to feed the less fortunate during times of stress. He has provided countless free meals to first responders and essential workers during this pandemic and during natural disasters in Georgia, Florida, and Alabama over the last 10 years. He lives in Columbus with his wife, Runa, and 2 daughters, Cecil and Lucille, and 3 dogs. Sanjay, you are beginning a great adventure in leadership, in friendship, and in service to your community and fellow man. You have been invited to join Rotary, but it'll be through your own actions that you actually become a Rotarian. I am proud to be a Rotarian, and you will be provided with a pin by which your fellow Rotarians and the community at large will recognize you as a Rotarian, and we ask you to wear it proudly every day. When you shake the hand of one Rotarian, you are within reach of 1.2 million more. Together, we are working to enrich youth, ensure health, develop communities, and promote peace. Please join me in welcoming Sanjay to our club.
Thank you, Kaiser. I really appreciate for introducing me to the club. And I'd like to thank you, the Rotary Club, for giving me an opportunity to be part of this great organization. And be part of it. And I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Sanjay, I want to welcome you on behalf of our club. Founded in 1916, we're club number 200 out of over 35,000 clubs currently. We look forward to getting to know you. You are joining the world's largest humanitarian organization in the world with over 1.2 million members working to practice the passion for service. So we look forward to getting to know you better and serving alongside of you. One of the things that we've been able to do in these virtual meetings is to spend a little bit of time getting to know the programs within our own club. And at this time, we'll hear from Rebecca Nix as she tells us about the Children's Fund.
Thank you, President Tyler, and hello, fellow Rotarians. My name is Rebecca Roth Nix, and I proudly serve as Vice President for External Relations at LaGrange College. This is my second year to be a member of the Rotary Club of Columbus. Today, I would like to talk with you about the Children's Fund. Who loves receiving a birthday card in the mail? I know I do. The Children's Fund Committee sends birthday cards to each member of the Rotary Club of Columbus. And in the card, we ask members to consider making a charitable donation of $1 per year of age they are celebrating. The funds raised throughout the year go to support children in our community. Last year, thanks to many of you, almost $7,500 was donated towards the effort. We were able to make gifts to 5 local nonprofits, including the Columbus Symphony Orchestra, Easter Seals, the Boys and Girls Club, the Columbus Museum, and First Readers. Please consider making a gift to this important cause. It doesn't even have to be on your birthday, and it can even be higher than your age. Thank you for considering this wonderful opportunity to help the children in Muskogee County.
Thank you, Rebecca, for your work and your committee's work on that important program for our club. And now we're going to hear from Ian Bond on a special GRSP recognition.
Thank you, President Tyler and fellow Rotarians. I'm Ian Bond, and I've been a member of the Rotary Club of Columbus for about 15 years. My passion in Rotary is the Georgia Rotary Student Program, promoting world peace through understanding by bringing international students to spend a year in Georgia since 1946. I currently serve as one of the District 6900 directors for GRSP and am the district chair nominee. GRSP is financially strong because of the generous donations of Rotarians throughout the state, and especially from the Rotary Club of Columbus. The interest from the GRSP endowment now pays for 1/3 of the total cost of every student that we welcome to Georgia. So it is with great pleasure today that we recognize Don Sando as a Will Watt Fellow, because Julie Sando has generously donated $1,000 to the GRSP endowment in Don's honor. It's good just to be reminded that you can make a donation to the GRSP endowment in honor of a family member who is not necessarily a member of our Rotary Club. So let's encourage you to continue to support the GRSP endowment. And also, once again, Julie and Don, thank you so much for your generosity.
Thank you, Ian. And thank you, Julie and Don, for your generosity in supporting the GRSP program. And before we introduce our program, I have a few quick announcements. Our online Rotary Poker is going strong. We're meeting each Monday evening. And our happy hour mix will next be held next Thursday at 6 to 8 p.m. And at this time, Past President Betsy Covington will introduce our program.
President Tyler and fellow Rotarians, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today, even if it's only from my basement office. Like all of you, I'm fascinated with this chance we have right now because of these 3 major crises before us: the COVID-19 pandemic, its accompanying economic crisis, and the civic discussions we're having on racial equity and justice. We're learning to innovate, listen to each other, and see situations with new eyes. I'm thrilled to introduce our speaker to you today because I believe he's an excellent leader for just such a time. Not only is he brilliant, he's really, really nice. And Fred's superpower is that he's able to express his very complex thoughts in a way that's exceedingly normal and down to earth. Fred Crawford came to Columbus in 2015 when he joined Aflac as Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer. As CFO, Fred used his nearly 3 decades of financial and leadership experience to lead and oversee all aspects of the financial management of company operations. In January, just 6 months ago, Fred was promoted to President and Chief Operating Officer of Aflac. In this expanded role, he leads a number of areas that are pivotal to Aflac's growth and long-term success, including executing enterprise growth initiatives, transforming the company by leveraging digital growth and efficiency initiatives, delivering on key strategic initiatives that achieve expected returns on investment, and ensuring the financial stability and strength of Aflac Incorporated with oversight of financial risk and investment operations in Japan and the U.S. This is a big, big job. Before joining Aflac, Fred served most recently as Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of CNO Financial Group in Indianapolis. Prior to that, he spent more than a decade at the Lincoln Financial Group in roles of progressive responsibility. Before joining Lincoln Financial Group, he led leadership positions at Bank One Corporation. Fred received his Bachelor of Arts from Indiana State University and a Master of Business Administration from the University of Iowa, where he currently serves on the advisory board of its Tippie College of Business. Here in Columbus, Fred and his wife, Priscilla, are active in our community. Fred joined the board of the Community Foundation in 2016, and he marvelously serves on our Finance and Investment Committee, which is a critical role for our nearly $200 million organization. Priscilla serves as chairman of the board of advisors of the Schwob School of Music at Columbus State University. Fred, I so appreciate you being with us today and your being so flexible. Fellow Rotarians, you will enjoy getting to know Fred Crawford. Let's give him a warm Rotary welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Betsy. And thank you to the Rotary Club. By the way, the brilliant and nice piece, I wrote that for Betsy and she delivered it flawlessly. And so thank you for those kind comments. And Tyler, thank you for inviting me. Let me just hit on a topic that is very important for all of us right now. And Betsy commented on it, and I think it makes sense to do. I'm going to spend my time here this morning with you, and this, I guess, now coming into the afternoon, talking about Aflac and how we're facing off against the COVID crisis globally, in our case, both in Japan and the U.S., and stay at a high level, really with the idea of perhaps giving some insight into just what does a large company, in our case, a large financial service company, do in this type of environment. But it's very important to comment first on the activities we've been witnessing over the last couple of weeks related to social injustice and raising the topic of racism and its plague on our citizens, on our communities, and on our economics. And this is very important. The Rotary Club is committed, I know, to community and closing the gap of any racial and social injustice. And obviously the Community Fund is expressly designed around particularly closing economic gaps, educational gaps, social and welfare gaps that are often at the root of what then emerges in the way of these types of issues that challenge us all. Aflac as a company has always been, in our 65 years, we currently are, and we intend to be in our future, committed to diversity and inclusion and closing these gaps. And I do want you all to know that as a significant member of this community that cares deeply about this issue, we stand ready to help and bring our assistance to the forefront in pushing to close these gaps and solve these issues. It's interesting, and I'll just on a personal level, I'll let you know, many of you know Teresa White, who is an African-American woman, and for us here at Aflac, she's most importantly the very strong and capable leader of Aflac US. She also sits on the board of Synovus and is very involved in the community. It's interesting in that over the course of the last couple of weeks, Teresa and I have been working together to really talk through as a company what we need to be doing and engaging in with our employees, with our distribution partners, with our policyholders and the broader communities we serve in on this topic of racial inequity and social inequity and how to address it. But what's interesting about it is that we first took time to just talk as individuals. As a white male I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago and largely in all white neighborhoods or nearly all white neighborhoods, same with my high school. And Teresa grew up in the Dallas area in a more racially diverse community and as well as schooling, et cetera. And before we even moved on to talking about what to do with respect to or where we should be active as a company or corporation, we just talked personally about our experiences. And most importantly, I shared with her a dialogue I had with my son on the topic, who was asking me questions and talking about it. And she shared with me conversations she was having with her son on the same topic. And both of us from similar sides of the arguments, but different perspective for obvious reasons. And I share that with you only because here we are, a $30+ billion corporation, and one of the largest in our industry, a Fortune 130 company. Yet that dialogue, just that personal dialogue and perspective, and walking a little bit in the shoes of each other to understand better the sensitivities, meant a lot in ultimately shaping and thinking through what will be our company's statement, what will we sign on for, what will we do to continue to promote and push it forward. And so one of the things I would just share with you is take this opportunity to engage with each other, to talk openly about the issues and the challenges. As Betsy knows, the Community Foundation sponsors On the Table, which is a community organized event where community leaders and just everyday citizens sit around and talk about the community and where we have challenges and where we can close a multitude of gaps, including this. So let me just say we're committed as a company. I'm committed as an individual. And where we can help, please let Aflac know, and we'll be there for all of you. We're all in this together, as you know. So let me transition now to the coronavirus and just a window into Aflac. So let me just start by saying this. We're a unique company in that, interestingly, we were very early in understanding the dynamics and taking action. And that's not because we're a bunch of epidemiologists who somehow knew better than anybody in terms of the virus. It's really for two reasons. One is our Japan footprint has made us somewhat accustomed to the notion of pandemic risk, dating back to the SARS event, where our Japan operations had to ready themselves quite significantly in preparation for what could be a challenge. As you all know or may remember, in early February, Japan was dealing with the Diamond Princess cruise ship that was off their coast. And while we were not engaged with the government actions associated with that, we were keeping very close contact with what the Japanese government was looking to do and how they were seeking to protect themselves as they brought passengers on shore and to eventually move them home. And then, as you all know, in fact, there was even an announcement today, Japan was eager to try to defend as best they could at the time the Olympic Games scheduled for this summer, which they ultimately were unsuccessful in doing so, but had hopes at that time of doing it. So they clamped down very, very hard on restrictions around social distancing and staggered work hours and impressing upon businesses to take action. We stood up a crisis management operation right away there and started into activities, and then really brought it to the U.S., our U.S. operations, far earlier than anyone else in the industry because of that. The other dynamic that we benefited from is, as you all know, we're what we would call a morbidity company, meaning we're a health insurance-oriented company. And as a result of that, we have a level of pandemic expertise surrounding our business just to keep track of what that risk could mean for the company. And that includes at our board level. And so one of our board members is a woman by the name of Barbara Reimer, Dr. Barbara Reimer. And Dr. Reimer is the head of public health, School of Public Health. She's the dean of School of Public Health for University of North Carolina. And she has been involved in advising past presidential councils and others on topics of infectious disease and other public health issues. Not only does she have a lot of knowledge, but she has an incredible network of knowledgeable people that she has access to for information. And she warned us as early as the first few weeks of February. In fact, we actually remember the date. It was our February 13th board meeting where she spent a fairly good amount of time helping educate us all on what they were seeing develop at that time in China, and then starting in Italy, and then what may mean for the U.S. So we jumped on it early and we benefited from that. The way we approach this crisis is primarily through an existing crisis command center structure that we have. This is a global command center and then 2 national command centers, both in Japan and the U.S. And they're set up for, much like many companies, they're set up to handle everything from cybersecurity events to earthquakes or natural disasters, particularly in Japan, then also, of course, in the U.S. And they're designed around that and business recovery efforts and addressing these types of issues. Separate from that group, we have actuaries and financial expertise in what we call our financial leadership group that deals with any financial and market stress type issues that may come from a crisis. And so we right away stood up the command centers in a more formal and regular meeting process with daily reports, weekly global meetings, which included teleconference meetings between Japan and the U.S. to look at addressing the issue. And the activities of that group tended to surround the following. First and foremost, actions with respect to our employees. And so making sure our employees were safe. We did things that you are now used to, such as cutting down travel, international travel. We staggered the work hours, particularly in areas of high commute, such as Tokyo, where you don't want everybody commuting at the same time. We restricted the movement of people between floors of buildings and building to building. We reduced all meeting sizes to no greater than 5 people in a meeting. And obviously, we outfitted all of our organization floor by floor with appropriate sanitizing material and so forth. And then we started to install deep cleaning every evening as part of attacking the virus. Soon thereafter, it became clear that that was not going to be enough and that the risk was high enough to where we had to start moving remotely. And today, as we sit here, we have about 80%, not quite 80% of our workforce in Japan working remotely. And in the U.S., we actually have above 90%. In fact, it's approximately 98% of our workforce is working remotely. We have around 7,000 employees in Japan and approximately 6,000 employees in the U.S. And so we've been quite forward in that. Now, interestingly enough, we have not seen much in the way of operational disruption. Certain things are not quite at the tolerance levels that we would normally have in a business as usual environment, but they are doing the job. They are operating properly. We tend to focus mostly on what we call breathe air and drink water issues, which for us would be things such as call center activity and answering and supporting our customers It would be claims, obviously, particularly in this time frame. Now is the time where we have an opportunity to step up and show the value of having our products by paying claims, paying them quickly, and paying cash in your pocket at a time where there's both potential health concerns as well as economic concerns with job loss, et cetera. So we've been focused on those issues, and that's going well. We've had to take certain actions related to our policyholders, and the culture of the company is to get out in front of any regulatory standards with that respect. And so we've offered grace periods, for example, where people do not need to pay their premium for a period of time if they're in tough cash flow position. We've expanded the definition of what a hospital is and what hospital treatment is, because hospitals start to change when you're running tight on hospital beds and ICU rooms in particular. And so we've been much more liberal on that because we don't want to adhere to definitions that miss the point of the coverage of the policy. And then we've tried to make it easier for people to use our policies because they can't always get the right paperwork to submit the claim and get their money. And we know that's a more difficult environment right now. So we do things more virtually or data-driven, digitally, if you will, as opposed to paper-based. And so taking those moves, we've supported our agents with interest-free loans and certain other types of financial forgiveness, realizing they are really small business owners. An insurance agent is nothing more than a small business owner that is suffering from the same thing that your local restaurant is in terms of a lack of face-to-face interaction, meeting with clients, and selling product and advising clients on the importance of the product. And so all of that really hurts, and we need to support that effort. And then the community. I mentioned the community commitment earlier, but more broadly on the coronavirus, we've offered up about $11 million of community support, $5 million in Japan, $6 million in the U.S., all of it directed towards essentially first responders, both in Japan and in the U.S., is where we are moving the money to have the highest impact. Interestingly enough, the latest grant we gave was $1 million towards a firm that specializes in standing up a call center to deal with the psychological challenges and emotional challenges that first responders face during this period of time. And so something never to forget is that while there is the virus that we're obviously paying close attention to, there's also a lot of psychological challenges and other types of side effect issues, if you will, or offshoot tangential issues that individuals face under stress like this. And so we are paying close attention to that as well. The wrapping that up in a bow, what are we really doing? Well, what we're really doing is safeguarding the franchise. We've learned a lot of lessons. People like me with some gray hair and experience that went through the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008, we learned some very important lessons during that period of time. And one of them is do not pull back on investment and anything associated with securing the franchise and defending the franchise. And the reason for that is that there will be a recovery. You will come out the other side, and it will be your franchise that brings money, profitability, cash flows, and capital back into the company. And should you need to raise capital, whether it be debt or equity or what have you, to support your business and bridge to the other side, it's going to be your franchise that attracts that capital. And so preserve your ratings and preserve your franchise so that you can have both access to capital as well as generate capital through operations. When you don't do that, when you pull off on those types of investments like technology, infrastructure, investing in your people, maintaining your talent during this time, if you disinvest in all of that, the terminology that's often used is you'll come out the other side of the crisis as a zombie company, meaning you survived, but you've done so much damage to your franchise that you're effectively stalled in place. You have an inability to grow and thrive. you are in effect a zombie company. And that is a very dangerous place to be in, even though you may be happy that you simply survived it. So we focus all of our efforts on preserving and protecting and defending the franchise, and have done that well. Unfortunately, we have the financial strength to do so. Stress testing has been a big issue for the company, and stress testing is something that you hear in the news. You often hear it's associated with banks, because banks are required under regulatory standards to stress test themselves. But this became an incredibly important function during the last financial crisis, and it's an incredibly important one now. That type of stress testing, in our case on the claims side related to our policies in Japan and the US, and then on the asset side, we have $130 billion of assets under management. That stress testing is very instrumental in guiding your decision making and moving quickly while the markets are open and fluid and accessible to raising capital, for example, or addressing any potential shortfalls under extreme stress conditions. The other, and in fact, Aflac, for as much capital and liquidity and financial strength that we have, we still went out in the markets very early in March and raised another $1.5 billion of contingent liquidity. And we're frankly just having it sit on our balance sheet at the holding company should conditions get really bad. And so it really guides your decision making. The second reason why stress testing is important is because your investors really need to understand how bad looks. And until they understand that, they may not really feel comfortable investing in you. And in fact, you could become an uninvestable company without knowing that. In fact, I would argue that the real turnaround of the crisis of 2007 and 2008 was when the banks finally released essentially legitimate, reliable, and respected stress testing, which showed very bad news, but for the first time told everybody what bad looked like, such that investors could make reasonable decisions on prices and offering up their capital for companies. And so it's very important to do. We did that working off of CDC information, Johns Hopkins information, and Washington University information on the infection rate. We are assuming pretty stressful conditions, such as over 6 million people are infected and 1.5 million require some level of hospitalization, 40% of them ICU. In Japan, interestingly enough, we're assuming 1.2 million people infected with a high level of hospitalization given the age of that population. And right now, both countries, particularly Japan, are running far below that. I don't know if many of you have kept pace with Japan or not, but they are really just a touch over 20,000 infections and less than 1,000 deaths in Japan. And so their actions have been quite successful in curtailing the issue. And even though we're using quite stressful conditions in the U.S., I would tell you that we're tracking obviously much better than our stress conditions in the U.S., but we'll have to see how things unfold. A couple other comments I would make is returning to work is a big topic right now, and how we will return to work. And I would tell you at Aflac, the way we're approaching it is science-based, and that is and location by location based. And we're taking what's called a gating approach to bringing people back, meaning before we bring people back to the work site in certain locations, you'll have to pass certain gating issues in terms of the infection rate, the rate of spread, hospital capacity, local and community health professionals and what they are recommending. And then, of course, making sure your work site is set up particularly strong around social distancing and so forth to keep your employees safe. I think most companies, based on discussing with my peers, are talking in terms of roughly 10% of the workforce coming back in the early days, which is unlikely to be much ahead of even the August and September timeframe for most companies, with the bulk of employees coming back later in the year, and in many cases, a portion of employees not coming back until the start of the new year. And that may seem a long way away and extra cautious, but if you're operating in a generally acceptable way right now, and you don't need to bring your employees back to maintain a certain base operating level, then what is to be gained out of putting anybody at risk? And you also, remember, put the community at risk. And so I would tell you that if you're a company that can operate remotely successfully, you should work to remain remote working successfully. Why? Because if everybody comes back at the same time and we find that there is a surge of the infection rate again, we will all tax our community hospitals and ICU rooms, and it will become a true community issue. So in some respects at Aflac, we think it's an obligation we have to be particularly careful in bringing back our roughly 4,000 employees locally, because we don't want to be inadvertently the cause of any pressure on the healthcare system, and it's not in the best interest of our employees. So I think that's the way we're approaching it. I would only end by saying this, and that is, I often get asked what will change as we go forward. I think really nothing changes dramatically in the way in which our business, and I think many businesses, are structured. But what it's done is it's accelerated the digital roadmaps. Most every company has a digital roadmap related to dealing with their customers, related to operations, and the digitization of the business model has been on a 3 to 5 to 7 year adoption rate and roadmap. And what I'm finding is most companies, Aflac including, are pulling out of those roadmaps the digital related, virtual related, customer self-service related, paperless environment related activities, and simply accelerating it up into 2020 and investing it. And so we're actually investing more money in Japan and in the US in our technology and digital applications because it's all sped up in this environment. That's probably, to me, what the biggest change I'm seeing on the business front. So with that, and given the time we have, I'll just leave it off to any questions people have and maybe hand it off to Cameron.
Sure. Thank you, Fred. That was a wonderful, wonderful report. We appreciate your time today. And before we get into questions, I want to highlight something for all of our Rotarians, which is Betsy Covington posted in our comment thread that Aflac extended a $100,000 match offer for the Coronavirus Response Fund here in Columbus. And they're matching gifts dollar for dollar up to $2,000 contributions from one individual or entity. So if you want to participate and take advantage of Aflac's generosity there, it's a good time to do it, as your donation would be doubled. So Betsy thanked Aflac and posted a link for Rotarians that want to participate in that effort. Fred, we appreciate your leadership and time and service on the Community Foundation board, and of course through the company's generosity and investment in Columbus. And of course, your prioritization of keeping your employees healthy is, as you mentioned, very important for our community overall and our hospitals. So we appreciate that as well. A couple questions that have emerged, and we're probably going to be able to do one or two. But one is, have you, community overall, has Aflac considered any premium adjustments due to increased risk on certain policies moving forward?
No, we haven't. And remember, this is different than, say, property casualty, where you often will see prices fluctuate post a hurricane or a major event. In our case, our policies are priced for a long-term level of usage, and the fact that any particular period has a higher or spike level of claims doesn't necessarily cause us to think differently about our policies. Interestingly enough, the policies that are most under pressure in the U.S. in the life insurance industry is actually savings-based life products and annuities, and it's not because of the claims or health issues related to the virus. It's related to very low interest rates. And interestingly, in our industry, what you'll find is more often than not, it's the interest rate in capital markets that causes more pricing pressure on products than does, say, morbidity or mortality or longevity, which is sort of actuarially priced in with pads, cushions designed for that. But there's another reason too, and that is for all of our love of the Aflac duck, and we love the duck, and our commercials and our brand, we obviously hold that near and dear. It's always been the case that the number one branding solution for our company is paying a claim. The best thing we could ever do to advertise the company is simply pay a claim. And the thing we suffer most from, the reason why we are so much larger in Japan with 25 million policies in Japan and 13 million policies in the US is because in Japan, they value supplemental health insurance the same way they value auto insurance or homeowners insurance. In the US, there's not much value placed on supplemental health insurance, out-of-pocket expenses, deductibles, co-pays, and until you actually get injured or are sick, and then you start to realize as the bills come in that there's quite a bit of out-of-pocket above and beyond your major medical. And so we end up we're discounted in the eyes of consumers. And so the number one thing we can do is pay a claim and pay it quickly. So we're an unusual insurance company where the last thing we are attempting to do is back away from paying claims, because it would be the worst thing we can do, not only for our brand, but also just to promote the growth rate of the company. So no, we don't have any pricing issues in mind.
Good. Well, thank you. One more question, I think, is, and you touched on it really in a different context with the Japan market and how it's different from the U.S., but related to the pandemic, have you recognized anything specific that the U.S. could learn from Japan's success in controlling the pandemic?
Well, there's lessons learned. There's lessons that the U.S. can learn, and there's lessons that Japan can learn from the U.S. So on the U.S. side, certainly social distancing is a customary thing in Japan because Tokyo in particular has 37 million people. Think of it this way. Tokyo has 3 times the density of New York, 37 million people on the same relative geographic footprint as New York. And because of that density, it's the cultural norm in Japan to wear masks during cold and flu season. And so mask wearing is a natural thing. There's no such thing as a household not having a set of masks in the household that they use normally due to the density and wearing that. Also, the bowing versus shaking hands is something that dates back, obviously, centuries upon centuries, but it's not just a custom. It actually originates out of a fear of spreading disease and infectious disease and all that way back when. And so there's no such thing as paying attention to washing your hands in Japan. The Japanese wash their hands as a matter of habit many, many, many times a day. In fact, you cannot go to a fast food place without getting a sanitized napkin in a wrapper that comes with your meal, whether that meal cost you $2 or $40. And so there's natural customs related, cultural related issues that help protect Japan to some degree. And then they march in unison oftentimes when it comes to defending themselves. And so they're somewhat homogenous culturally and in the way in which they act. So when the government suggests taking action, they all take action. Whereas in the US, when the government suggests taking action, we still all make our own minds up as to what we think might be the right thing to do or not. And so Japan tends to really move quickly and with force when they are threatened with an issue. What Japan can learn from the U.S., however, is Japan is heavily paper-based. You might have caught on to the fact that we have 80%, 75% of our workers working at home in Japan, but 98% in the U.S. Why is that? Because Japan is still heavily paper-based. They're still paper and manually process-based, and that's got to change. That is not good for, obviously, pandemic risk. It's not good for business continuity planning. It's not even good for an earthquake. And so we're hoping that this experience really spurs a lot more activity of moving away from paper and paper-based applications and work, much like the U.S. has done.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Fred. That brings us to time. We just appreciate your time again and your leadership, and we're so glad that you're in Columbus.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure, and we're really enjoying it. And I appreciate the warm welcome that my wife and I received from arriving here 5 years ago from the north. My wife's from Minnesota, and I'm from Chicago, and so we've been adopted by the Southern culture. I was talking to Dan about risk management, and Dan Amos, who you all know, and Dan said, well, Fred, risk management is very simple. Always make sure you shoot the alligator closest to the boat. And I said, Dan, I've never heard that one before, but it makes so much sense to me. So I'm really embracing cultural terminology. And that's my tip of the day for crisis management. Whatever you do, make sure you shoot the alligator closest to the boat.
That's good advice. Thanks, Fred.
Thanks.
Yep. Thank you both. Thank you, Cameron, for fielding our Q&A. Fred, thank you so much. I want to echo what Cameron said. We're so pleased to have you specifically and Aflac as a company in Columbus. And I know that so many of us are proud when we talk to our friends out of town and talk about Aflac being headquartered here and our association with that. And in addition to the coronavirus fund, your generosity there, I want to point out this is just totally a coincidence, but in 2 weeks, our speaker will be the CEO of the Global Center for Medical Innovation, which Aflac has contributed $2 million towards the development of PPE for our various communities.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, in recognition of your visit with us, it's our tradition to donate a children's book to the Columbus Public Library with your name inscribed in it. So thank you again for joining us today, Fred.
Thank you. We love the library. It's a real jewel in the community, and so that means a lot to us. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. To the rest of our members, thank you all for being here. I want to remind you that we have released our second survey. The board is putting a lot of thought into how to safely return, how to do it in a way that works for members that are ready to return now, members that are not ready to return now. No announcement at this time, of course, but that second survey is still available. It'll be available through this evening. So if you have not taken the second survey, please do so. And if you don't have the link, you can request that from the office. Next week, our speaker will be Synovis's president, Kevin Blair. I hope you will join us at that time. And until then, we're adjourned.